Hello there, I'm Ishiro. On this channel, I make tutorials on how to get better at Weiss Schwarz. And today I'm teaching you how to play in the late game. So in my last video, how to win at Weiss Schwarz, I gave general tips for how to play on all levels, but now we are going more in depth on what is arguably the most important level in Weiss Schwarz, the level 3. Once again, I'll be assuming you run a rush deck, the most played archetype in Weiss Schwarz. So the first thing is, all games of Weiss Schwarz end the same way. You output enough damage and your opponent doesn't cancel. Most of the time, it will happen despite your opponent having a decent compression, and I won't deny it, there's a huge part of luck in this game, and it can be quite frustrating. So even if in the end, who wins is determined by damage, there are two more ways to survive longer at level 3 until you can get the win. Number 1, you compress so much that you start to cancel everything, and your opponent just cannot touch you. This is why compression is such an obsession with Weiss Schwarz players. But it only works if the opponent doesn't have access to any decompression tool, like Sock Swap. And number 2 would be to be ahead in resources. So if your opponent doesn't have enough hand or stock to line up their finisher, you don't need to cancel as much to survive. So this is how to win, but remember, these are also 3 ways to lose. You just took random damage, your opponent compressed too much and you can't get damage in, or you're too behind on resources and you cannot play your finisher. Okay, so now that we know that, you are at level 3. What do you do? Well, what I like to do is go through a 2-step process. You evaluate the situation, and then you take a decision on what to do. So let's go through the evaluation first. You need to gather information. So first, look at damage. How much damage do you need to deal to finish your opponent? Do you need to deal 10 damage or 3 damage? How much damage can you do with your character's effect or combo climaxes? This is what we call the kill range. The kill range is the maximum number of damage that you can do by playing specific cards, usually 3 of your climax combo. There's a Japanese guy on Twitter that shows the kill range of all the finishers from recent sets, so check it out if you're curious. So once you check the damage you need to do, check your opponent's compression. How many climaxes do they have in waiting room? Remember if they have any in stock or hand that you know of. This way, you can evaluate the ratio of climaxes for cards in deck, and check if your damage is likely to pass or not. So let's have an example. If you take the Spy Family Triadal combo, it's a bound 3 on attack. So because they have 2 soul and you play a climax, each attack will deal 3, if you don't count the triggers. So your kill range is 3 times 6, so 18 damage. If your opponent has 4 climaxes in 20 cards, you can expect them to cancel 4 times. So you should have 2 attacks for free that go through, so they should take 6 damage. It's harder to make this evaluation when the opponent is about to refresh, so in these cases, just refer to their probability to cancel on the new deck. So let's say if they have 8 climaxes out of 32 cards, they have a 1 out of 4 chance to cancel, so in theory, a bound 3 is likely to pass. And lastly, in the evaluation, check your opponent's resources. Is their finisher ready in hand, or somewhere in the waiting room? Do they have enough stock to pay for it? So once you gave out all 3 of these informations, it's time to take a decision. And basically, there's 2 possibilities. Go for the win, or try to survive for 1 more turn. Let's go through the reason to choose one or another. So you want to go for the win if your opponent is in your kill range, they are not compressed enough, and you have the resources for your finisher. Or, if you are in the kill range of your opponent, because you have bad compression, or you're too high on damage, maybe at 3-5, and you don't trust your chances to survive their next turn. Now for reasons to delay for a turn. It might be because your opponent is outside of your kill range, so they are too compressed or too low on damage, maybe still at level 2. It could be because you don't have enough resources to assure the kill, and you need 1 more turn to prepare them, make 3 more stocks with your attacks. It can be because you have healing, defensive tools, and or a good compression, so you trust your chances to survive for a turn. Or because your opponent is low on resources, for instance they have only 4 stocks or 3 in hand, and you don't think they can threaten you. Sometimes the decision is not easy. Your opponent is compressed, they have resources, and you don't trust your chances to survive for 1 more turn. So you're just hesitating, should I go for the win, knowing that they might cancel? But if I don't go all in, I might just die during their turn. And this is why fighting in the mid game is so important to not be in this situation. Make sure you master resource management, dealing damage over the game, and answering your opponent's board, because if you let them snowball during the mid game, sometimes no matter what you do, you're just already lost when you arrive at the late game. I might do another video on this channel to cover the topic of the mid game. But okay, you're at level 3, you're in this situation, you're adopting, what to do? Well, information is key, and knowing your matchup helps a lot. Sometimes the opponent has access to decompression tool, reducing your chances to survive, and or defensive tool that can shut down your game plan. So depending on that, it can influence your evaluation on your chances to kill or to survive. Take that into account. Another thing to consider is that if your opponent uses their defensive tool to survive your finisher, they might not have the resources to finish you after. So for instance, they are playing Hololive, they have to use the HMRS counter, they need to discard 4 for that, So it will be pretty hard for them to assemble a triple finisher after that. Or maybe they're playing Sword Art Online and you force them to play the anti-damage counter. So they have to pay 3, maybe they cannot play their level 3s after that. So that's one more argument for playing your finisher, to force them to use these. Also, if you're at level 3 and your opponent is still at level 2, sometimes it's a consideration to not deal too much damage, to not put them at level 3, so that they don't have access to their finisher, only to go all in on your next turn. If after all of that, you're still in doubt, the answer is often, just go for the win anyway. They might just get unlucky and take the damage, so better take a shot than holding back and regretting you didn't try. One more thing I recommend, make this wall evaluation when you are at 2-5-2. If you see that there's an opportunity to go for the kill, it's easy to just clock, then use an effect to clock again or refresh to level up to 3-0 and just unleash your finisher. So okay, you evaluated the situation and you took a decision. What to do now? If you decide to go all in and go for the win, usually you would start the turn by clocking to draw 2, if you still need your climax, your finisher or cards to discard. If you accepted that this is your last turn, you should use all the resources available to perfect your finisher turn, as they won't be useful if you die the next turn. The exception would be if during the battle phase you see that your opponent cancels so much and is out of your kill range, but there's no way that you can win this turn, you might want to stop paying for your finisher's effect to have enough resources for the next turn or for your defensive tools, if you have some. So now it's the battle phase. And one of the most important things when you're trying to put your opponent at level 4 is to avoid overkilling. Overkilling means dealing more damage than needed to put your opponent at level 4. So for instance they're at 3-6 and you're trying to deal 3 damage. You want to avoid this because each overkilling damage is one more chance for them to cancel and to survive. So how do you do this? The first way to avoid overkilling is to order your attacks correctly. So let's take an example. Your opponent is at 3-5 and you can attack for 2, for 1 and for 1 soul. So in this case, what I suggest is to start with the attack for 2. Because if the opponent cancels, you can finish them with a 1+1. If you started with a 1 damage and they don't cancel it, then your attack for 2 will be an overkill. The second way to avoid overkilling is to side attack. Because your character's souls get reduced by the opponent's level, it lets you adjust to not overkill. So for instance, instead of attacking your opponent at 3-5 for 3 souls, you could side attack a level 1 to only attack for 2 souls. And this way you deal the exact damage you need. So when it's your main phase, do your best to anticipate on which character it will be interesting to side attack, and during the battle phase, attack last with the character that have an interesting side attack. This way you can choose, do you want to front attack to deal more damage or to side attack for less damage. Also for this reason, try to not leave any level 1 or level 2 in the front row at level 3 to not let your opponent avoid overkilling. The last thing to keep in mind is that soul triggers can be the cause of unwanted overkills. So you attack for 2 damage, you trigger and now it's 3 damage, and your opponent cancels as the 3rd card. I'm sure this happened to you at least once. So if you have a card that lets you check the card on top of your deck, it's a good idea to use it to see if you're going to trigger or not and adjust. If you don't, there's also an advanced technique of checking all cards with triggers in visible zones to evaluate the ratio of trigger and non-trigger that are left in your deck before attacking. So it's a good idea to remember how many triggers there are in your deck when you make the list. And lastly, most level 3s attack for 2 soul and +1 soul with the climax. So if you side attack a level 3, it means that you're doing 3-3, so 0, but it could be 1 because of the trigger. So there are situations where you just need to deal 1 damage in the game, and you have to decide, do I want to side a level 3 and take the risk of not killing them, or do I want to front attack and, okay, we just accept the overkill. Be careful because side attacking can be a pretty dangerous bet. And lastly, if you're going for the win, you also need to know how to play around your opponent's defensive tools. So the main way is to just side attack, to not trigger a counter step where your opponent can play their defensive backups. If you want more details on the specific defensive tools, you can watch my other video how to play around cards in Weiss Schwarz and refer to the level 3 part. I will have a link on the top. So that was the tips for if you decide to go all in. Now, what if you chose to stall for a turn? Let's go through the different defense technique. So first, healing is your best friend. It raises damage your opponent has to do, and it can force them to take more risks. You know that killing from 3-0 is harder than killing from 3-3. If your healer is also your finisher, you can consider playing them just for the heal and leaving them in the back row. This way they don't get reversed, and you can just put them in the front row on the next turn if you survived. On top of healing, you need to make sure that you make the best out of your compression. So refresh if you need to put climaxes back in the deck, and if possible, heal the refresh damage during your turn, rather than taking it during your opponent's battle phase. Else, you can just consider you at 3-1, and it's easier for them to kill you. If possible, don't pay out your clean stock to not make your refresh worse. A common way to lose is to just trigger 2 or 3 climaxes during your battle phase, so make sure to do what you can so that it doesn't happen. Once you're done with your deck manipulation for main phase, check your top deck if you can, reset it if you see climaxes, and just go to the battle phase if you don't see one. At least you know you have at least one clean trigger. And lastly, you should play around your opponent's level 3 options. Once again, you can refer my other video on how to play around cards in Weiss Schwarz for specific finishers. But a common trick you can do is to crush your front row to only leave direct attacks. Not only it's a technique to play around under your finisher, but even if your opponent doesn't run them, only leaving direct attacks means bigger % of damage, like your opponent is going to direct attack for 4, which means more chances to cancel. Only do that of course if you are compressed enough, because else you're just increasing your opponent's kill range. Now, on rare occasions, a game can last 2 or more turns at level 3. These are usually the most exciting games, as both players cancel a lot and every hit could be the last one. So what do I do if we both survived? Well, do all you can to reverse your opponent's level 3s and keep yours alive. Any surviving level 3 character saves a lot of resources, and any reverse character is less potential damage for the next turn, because having a finisher reverse often means that you have to pay a stock to search it back, and 2 stock to replace the character, so 3 stock in total. If it's your character that got reversed, you can consider to encore 3 them, so pay 3 stock to buy them back on the stage, to not have to need another character like a Brainstorm or a Drop Church to get back your finisher. Just know that you won't profit from the coming play effect if you do that. Then, climaxes are key. At this state of the game, the resources are generally low, as you both paid your stock for finishers, and outputting damage can be very difficult. Climaxes are an easy way to increase your kill range. If your opponent is at 3-5, even playing 3 level 0s and a climax can do 2-2-2 damage, and threaten lethal on each attack. So consider clipping a climax as one of your last cards in hand during your finisher turn, if that doesn't decrease your chances to survive. If your deck has a tool to get climaxes on demand, it's a huge advantage in these situations. Else, you can just clock to draw climaxes. You just cannot do it if you're at 3-6. As you both paid your stock, you get more and more decompressed, and becomes easier to finish the other. So mechanically, these games are not made to last forever. Also for a consideration, if you're playing in a tournament, depending on the rule sets, when the time runs out, the player with the least damage wins. Maybe play with that in mind, and starting from level 2, turn your resources into damage and healing as much as possible. But of course, preferably, don't win on time. Play faster. So that's it for how to play in the late game at Weiss Schwarz. One last advice. Ideally, try to play as if you're both trying to finish your opponent and defend in case they survive. Being able to combine both, unleashing your finisher while being at 3-0 and having a good compression will ask your opponent to do a lot of efforts to best you. Like and subscribe if you want to get more ways to win at Weiss Schwarz, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye!